Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Dejia James from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, which unites over 365 community organizations working to build a better Buffalo. We're delighted to join you every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m. You can also watch full video of every show on our YouTube page. Follow PPG Buffalo on Facebook and Instagram for more information on how to access video and the full podcast of our show. And of course, you can always get great information on our website, ppgbuffalo.org. All right, now I've done the spiel, so I'm going to get into our guests, which I'm very excited to have with us today. Today, we are joined by Juweria Dahir, Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship with Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. Juweria's worked really hard on creating pathways to entrepreneurship for years. I actually had the privilege myself to participate in some of the work she was doing years ago. And it was really my first foray as well into entrepreneurship. And I feel like it was one of the first programs that I felt like were accessible for me. I think some of the other programs I felt were a little far reaching, or you had to be like kind of a tech genius or something to try and get into. It seemed really kind of out of reach, but I felt like you were so approachable and the approach you had in the outreach and community that you did. So I'm really just excited to have you here saying all that. But I want to give you a chance to just introduce yourself to people, let people know what you do and how long you've been in Buffalo and all of that.
Oh, thank you so much for the kind words. And that means a lot.
Yeah.
The entry point is always important. And I'm so glad you felt comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm Juweria Dahir. I'm a Buffalo transplant. I'm really not from Buffalo, but I've been here about 10 years. So maybe I can claim it now.
I think so. A decade's a while.
Right? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm ethnically from East Africa. And my parents, unfortunately, had to leave their native land. It was post-colonialism, so they had to flee outwards.
Yeah.
And they ended up migrating all the way to a small rural town in Switzerland. And that's where I grew up. And so my childhood was there.
Wow.
It was called Männedorf. It's a small town. And we spoke Hochdeutsch, which is a type of German. And over the years, one of the reasons my mother wanted us to live there was because she was a farmer. And that's the only thing she knew. And so living in another farmland, it meant that she was able to provide for us.
Wow.
She was a single mother. She was in her 20s, didn't speak the language. The first time that she left and traveled and got on a plane. Mm-hmm. So I cannot imagine what she went through. But one thing's for sure, she had an entrepreneurial mindset.
Right.
You got to have that in order to survive and thrive. And so fast forward 10 years in, we learned more about the system. And at the time in Switzerland, if you were not a native, you could not pursue certain careers. So you could not become a doctor or become an attorney. Wow. There were certain limitations.
Yeah.
And I think when my mother found out about that, she said, well, it didn't make sense for us to move this far only for you guys as my children to have another glass ceiling.
Right.
And so she started shopping around. It's crazy to say shopping around, but that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
We ended up bouncing around in other parts of Europe, and then we eventually settled in the UK. So the UK is and really was most diverse. There was opportunities for us to actually have an upward mobility where we could study and, find others that looked like us and really start to live a life that we could all be proud of. So that's really where we started out.
Yeah.
And so for most people, when they ask me, where are you from? It's, where do I start?
Right.
But I call it the UK home. That's really been home to me.
Yeah.
Then I, fast forward, came here in 2013. I met a guy. He's from Buffalo. I think that's everybody's story. He said he was from New York. Okay.
Yeah. Big difference.
Anyway, so I'm here, ended up transferring with my bachelor's degree. I ended up going to get my master's degree here. I went to UB.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, I think the community here is what embraced me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel most at home now than I have ever.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, I don't know if I've ever had that anywhere else growing up, but I've moved around so much that I think that was very tough on me. But this is home, so I'm great to be here. So that's a little bit about who I am and where I came from.
That's awesome. I love that you're kind of telling the story of just like an unconventional kind of immigration story, right? I think a lot of people in America have a certain view of immigration because of propaganda and a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. But it's so interesting to me that you have a national, multicultural perspective on immigration from multiple different areas of even just Europe and America. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering about now that you've been in Buffalo for a long time, and obviously we have refugees, we have immigrants, we have a lot of different intersections of folks who are coming here for different reasons and on different type of timescales. What is your opinion of kind of opportunity here for immigrants and or refugees kind of in the area, and what your experience has been with the refugee immigrant community in Buffalo?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of cross similarities between the UK and the US, right?
Yeah.
I can't say too much about my native land because I really was just 2 months old when we moved out.
Yeah.
So all I know is Europe and the US now.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Europe, predominantly in the UK, there's a lot of social class divisions. So opportunities are segregated based on class.
Yeah.
In the US, of course, it's really more rooted in race.
Right.
And so when I moved to Buffalo, the first thing that really shocked me was just kind of seeing what the community looked like. I was standing on Main Street, like many people do, and you look east and west.
Yeah.
And just to see the vast difference of, vibrancy and sidewalks looking the way that they do on one side with affluent, trees and properties looking like they're in good conditions.
Yep.
And people just enjoying a good quality of life.
Yeah.
And you cross over to the other side, and I didn't see that same level of energy and vibrancy. And that really got me to question, why is it that certain communities look the way that they do in the U.S.? And I knew it was deeply rooted in, 50 years and plus years of disinvestment.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get into the root of it, and I thought policy might be maybe not the full answer, but it would give me a clearer perspective on what happened.
Yeah.
And so I actually picked up an internship. And so I'm pro on get yourself an internship because that's an opportunity where you can learn.
Yeah.
If you have, because that's also a luxury opportunity.
Right.
If you need to get paid, then unfortunately sometimes internships aren't even for you.
Right.
But at this time, it was for me. And so I got a internship in the mayor's office. It was called Urban Fellows Internship Program.
Yeah.
And it really just gave me an insight to study and use really my time and talent to understand what the research was telling me, what the data was telling me, because being data informed is equally important.
Yeah.
And understanding where the community is now and what 20, 50 years will look like.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my one-on-one urban planning.
Yeah.
I ended up, of course, getting my master's degree there. So that's something that I'm very comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so in terms of opportunity, the question that you asked me, I think, if you're not aware of opportunity, you're not going to be able to seek out those opportunities.
Right.
So I already was coming in with a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
Beating a lot of odds, of course, in my opinion, too. But I had a lot of tools and knowledge, and I had the drive. So I was fortunate enough to acquire that.
Right.
I think the internship helped me. It really kickstarted my career, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I was able to do a ton of research, good, bad, or indifferent. I think in politics, you have to just be aware of how policy is shaping our community and how it's impacting our lives.
Exactly.
So we can never kind of stay absent from it. So that's kind of where my opportunities began. I started making connections, doing a lot of listening, understanding what the concerns of the community were.
Yeah.
So that I could then be better equipped and have that in my toolbox.
Yeah.
And so that's really what started out for me. An opportunity can be different. So I speak the language.
Right.
Language barrier was not my issue, even though I learned English really in 7th grade.
Yeah.
7th grade is
Moving to the UK.
Yep, moving to the UK in 7th grade. Before that, I spoke German, I spoke Swedish, I speak Somali at home and Arabic. So
how many languages do you know? Oh my goodness, it's great.
4.5.
That's great. I mean, that's an amazing resource. Me and Regine, actually my colleague, we've been working on language access initiatives in the county and on the state level a little bit.
Yep. I worked with April Baskin on that too.
Yeah, she's a great champion. Shout out to Chairwoman Baskin.
Yeah,
she's working for so many different communities. I mean, she's just
paving the way.
The rock star. Yeah. But there are so many people in our community, especially when we were talking about interpretation and the assets that we have in the community of people who speak they aren't just bilingual, but speak multiple different, like to the point where you could probably consider them polyglots. Like
I haven't heard that word before.
It's where I think it's more than 4 languages. Okay. I think. Don't get me wrong if I'm wrong, sorry. But also I think it's for people who like learning new languages, consider for people who make it a hobby as well. But anyway, so, but there's such an asset-rich area here of people who could really offer robust interpretation services for the many different communities that live here. But it's a matter of government really resourcing those communities to make interpretation an accessible career for them and a career pathway. Because to be an interpreter for the UN has a lot of different requirements. And sometimes they even want you to have a doctorate and all these different things in linguistics, when a lot of people have just the practical reality of, I've lived in 5 different countries and I know these languages backwards and forwards. And how can we pipeline those people and their asset into this career field? Really long tangent there, but I'm just so interested. You've kind of like buzzed my mind with a bunch of different topics. But I'm interested in how you got from urban planning and policy work to entrepreneurship, and how kind of those things do have a meeting ground and opportunity, especially for the communities that you're talking about that have been underserved and disenfranchised, and how your passion, I guess, for entrepreneurship and this path in your career you're on now kind of occurred, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Yeah. So let's see, from urban planning, that's where I started to understand and learn the community, right? Fast forward, at the same time, while I was in City Hall, I was also getting my master's degree. So that was a simultaneous thing.
Yeah.
When I got my master's degree, really what helped me get through that process was a fellowship that I received. And so shout out to the Prentice Foundation. They have a scholarship called the Western New York Prosperity Fellowship. And it's very prestigious. Only UB and Canisius has it. But prestigious in a sense where not only do they cover you financially at graduate level, annually of $25,000, but they also plug you in to the Western New York leaders. And so the goal is really to bring, once you're in the fellowship, is to bring like-minded individuals that are students in the school who have an entrepreneurial mindset that want to grow the workforce of Western New York. So you have to somehow show that you're invested in the economy. And so if you're not bringing in people from the community, you can't talk about the economy and what that's going to look like.
Right.
And so I thought the program was fantastic. And that's really my first entry point where I was able to sit with a CEO of Kaleida, for instance, because I don't think I would ever have had that opportunity. And so that fellowship itself started to open doors for me, but it also opened my mind to the scale of the disparity we're talking about, the issues that's in front of us, and some solutions, and who might be the stakeholders that we all need to bring together. And so that's kind of where my entrepreneurial mindset came from. I think it also came from really just seeing my mother troubleshoot. And I hate to say this, but failure has just never been an option, because I think at the brink of failure meant that I was either not going to eat or something drastic was going to happen. And so now I think I have the luxury sometimes of failing, which is so incredible to be able to fail at certain things and still be okay, and for it not to be a life and death matter.
Right.
And so that's really where the connection was. My mother, her being a farmer, my father actually has his own construction company. He lives out in Canada. Great guy, but I was raised by my mother. But just having that entrepreneurial mindset and being a problem solver, I think, is really what constantly was within me. And so when I came to Buffalo, my father-in-law actually has a nonprofit organization called H.E.A.L International. And this is based out of the West Side. And the 2 co-founders, himself and another gentleman, migrated here to in Buffalo in the 1970s. And they came from Somalia, and Somalia, if you're familiar with it, it was it was colonized. It was colonized by 5 European countries. And so and the history that he shares, and really my ancestors share, it's really in line with the histories that African Americans have faced here too. Because on one side it was colonialism, the other side was slavery, right? But we are still connected, and we're really sharing, and unfortunately still grieving that same process. But there's also a lot of power in there and synergy if you know that history. And so a lot of times the nonprofit organization started out just focusing on immigrants and refugees, but slowly we realized that isolating that community itself was not going to be valuable, because the West Side is diverse. It has poverty is a big issue there. Narcotics is a big issue. Housing related issues. There's so much, and so we started to actually just become a hub and diversifying our board to be more reflective of the community, but also to diversify so that we can have more tools to be empowered to actually respond to the community's needs. And I think that also really helped me. That's a big entrepreneurial mindset there, supporting women on economic development issues, supporting women to be empowered on self-sufficiency. We teach financial literacy, and amongst so many other programs and services. And there's a bunch of other organizations in Buffalo that do something very similar. And it's important to highlight all of their efforts, because they're the ones that are on boots on the ground, touching the community. And so with that, when COVID hit, I know I haven't touched too much on my time at City Hall, but as an urban planner, I mean, you can imagine I was working on, neighborhood development projects, beautification, restoration initiatives, a ton of community engagement, and there was a ton of programs I was also overseeing from AmeriCorps, which really addresses anti-poverty work, Love Your Block, which was a big program funded by Bloomberg and What Works Cities on restoration of, facades of storefronts, but also vacant lots, etc.
Yeah.
And so in the mix of all of that, I think the entrepreneurial mindset is really what helped me. And I think the mindset is, people think the entrepreneurial mindset is just unique to an entrepreneur or a small business owner.
Yeah.
But it's not, because an entrepreneur is just like us. They're eating, they're sleeping, they're waking up, they're dealing with highs and lows.
Right.
But it's the mindset that they're cultivating that's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's what we really have to do in all of our spheres. So if you are an intern in an NGO or if you have a 500 Fortune company, that mindset is really going to take you far. But when COVID hits, that's really the pivotal moment for me. I felt like at the policy level, I was not able to have the impact that I wanted to.
Yeah.
And seeing that the fellowship had supported me from the entrepreneurial side of things, seeing the work that I was doing in the community, I thought, well, why don't I get myself out there to actually support the everyday person that's trying to do more than just a 9-to-5 job, that wants to build wealth? What are the barriers that they're facing? What is it that I can do to actually make that process easier for them?
Right.
And that was kind of the journey for me. And I'm so excited, that I'm here now at BNMC, and I know I'm going to continue making an impact, whether it's here or elsewhere. Yeah. But that's what it's about, giving people the opportunity to actually lift themselves up just by giving them the right tools.
No, I love that. And policy really is, and it's long-term work, right? And so sometimes getting that immediate gratification of I did something and I can see the result in the community right now, how it tangibly changed the single mother or the immigrant family that just got here. Sometimes it's not those immediate effects because it's longer-term systems change. And so I love that you're kind of talking about that resiliency and pivot that you're being able to do with entrepreneurship, that you can see that tangible, immediate lifestyle change for people that really give them, one, a really big boost of confidence, because I think that's the other thing that entrepreneurship really gives you is a sense of like control over your life and your circumstances that possibly working for other employers or different things you don't necessarily feel. And so I love that you're giving that opportunity to community. And I think the resiliency is the biggest piece of that, of kind of what you're talking about, that entrepreneurial mindset. I think a lot of people of color have to have that, like you said, just based on survival of, I don't have that opportunity to fail. Like you said, like I have to figure it out. I have to feed my child. I'm in school. My parents can't afford for me to fail out. Like I have to figure out how to get a job and go to school and do that internship you're talking about, because they really are, as you mentioned, really amazing opportunities. I think just like you, I've gotten the best experience and kind of career trajectory changing kind of lifestyle changes from internships and fellowships myself, because I think especially locally, there are a lot of nonprofits or even foundations giving the internship and fellowship opportunities that really do dig into the community of color that maybe in our own kind of day-to-day lives and maybe in our family that they've never seen before or had the opportunity to do before. And I know for me, coming from the West Side, being from a Cuban immigrant family that moved to the West Side in the 60s, I've just gotten so many opportunities from internships, fellowships, scholarships that are geared towards, certain socioeconomic backgrounds and things like that, that I do think are having that long-term impact in the community of giving us a different view of what the possibilities are in this life. And so I love now that there's a pivot to entrepreneurship that's included in that, because before it really was just, you can see, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, and all of these things that are conventional and probably everybody's immigrant parents would love for them to do.
Yes.
But the other thing is, like, we can be in public policy. I love, especially the representation we have now in like the House of Representatives and even senators and new people that we're seeing that show that we belong in policymaking and can be in policymaking, because for so long we didn't have the control over those areas. And actually those areas were used against our different communities. And so now that we can actually be in those rooms and be a part of negotiating those changes, there's still a lot of work to do there. And so it can be taxing, to say the least. And it's like I said, that longer term change that can definitely be gratifying, but it's not even just about making the change, but also implementing those changes and making sure that they're on track with, how they're supposed to be implemented and the time spacing and all of those things. And so it can be hard to keep up with, but I think you found a very great niche of being able to kind of still work on long-term change, because I think entrepreneurship and Gateways entrepreneurship still are long-term systems change, especially in terms of economic access, social mobility, all of those things, generational wealth building, all of those things we love to talk about, but also just having the immediate change of someone's working for themselves. Maybe a mother can make a business where she can work at home, still be with her children, and make the money she needs to cover her bills, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like immediate gratification of being able to help somebody with that lifestyle change, and maintaining some kind of balance for themselves. So I'm so inspired by everything you said. I want to dig a little bit more into H.E.A.L International and exactly kind of the services that you all provide and what you do, because I think that's amazing, especially being from people who resettled here. And it's just the story of so many organizations in Buffalo of people just persevering and making their own pathways. Yep. So just a little bit more about kind of what type of services you provide. You mentioned that you kind of elevated your services beyond just immigrant and refugee communities. And so wondering about that pivot as well. But what kind of services are you kind of comprehensively giving to the community?
Yes. Yeah. So H.E.A.L International, H.E.A.L is an acronym. It stands for Helping Everyone Achieve Livelihood. Livelihood, yes. Yeah. That was a mouthful. Yeah. And we were on West Ferry, so the foot of Ferry. We're really close to Broadwood Park. It's on Herkimer and West Ferry. And initially, actually, the way it got started was we were leasing out a space from Jericho Road. Mm-hmm. So Jericho has a space there. And across the street, a property was vacant. Mm-hmm. And like many other properties here, it was vacant. It was blighted. It was deteriorating. Yeah. And then it was scheduled to be demoed. Wow. And so we stepped in and said, hey, well, what if we were able to raise the funds to purchase this property and save it from being demolished and make this the headquarters for our building? Mm-hmm. And the city said, okay, and we went forward with it. Mm-hmm. We started doing fundraising. This took about 10 years. Yeah. It was 10 years of fundraising. Wow. Once we completed the funding that we needed to actually rehab, we started the project. So annually we would start whatever work was necessary. Yeah. And this is a beautiful, beautiful 2-story property. It's not residential. It's just mixed use. Yeah. So there's a cafe downstairs, and there's 3 tenants upstairs, 3 businesses, a boutique, a travel agent, and a transportation company. Mm-hmm. And then H.E.A.L offices are also upstairs. Mm-hmm. And then downstairs is a community room. Mm-hmm. And we were so purposeful in terms of making sure that the rent were being subsidized, that the tenants would get high quality space, because everything is brand new that we did. There was anything that we saved was polished to perfection. Yeah. And so we ended up receiving some attention from our local government. Yeah. We received some funding from Chairwoman Baskin. Yeah. The county was very supportive, and equally the city was supportive. And now we've received some funding from the city also. Our council member, David Rivera, was also very supportive in this process. And so there were a lot, and I don't want to just name drop, but there were a ton of people. But more importantly, it was the people that were coming in, doing the paint work for us, volunteering their time, installing the doors, installing the cabinets, that we didn't have to pay for all of that service. It was the community, and we were asking them to just volunteer their time if they were mobile. And so, and then there's also a beautiful community garden there. And the cafe itself is woman-run and woman-operated. Wonderful. So that's very purposeful. Yeah. We have 2 Ethiopian and Eritrean sisters that run their business out of there. So I highly recommend it. It's 240 West Ferry. They make great anjera. They make great breakfast food. And I think their hours are usually between 10 and 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Other than that, in terms of programming, there's kind of 4 pillars or 4 focus areas. Women empowerment is one, so we do a ton of services around there. Mm-hmm. And this is where we just teach self-sufficiency, and that can be in many forms of education. And so we bring women together. There's classes they can take. And the goal is really for them to be able to stand on their own. Yeah. And then financial literacy is a big one, because just teaching the element of understanding the difference between your needs and wants can save you so much money. Yeah. For many people, they don't know what it means to get a big loan, what the interest rate looks like. And there's a lot of predatory lending processes here still. And so if you're not educated about that, you're going to fall victim to that. So there's a lot of educational aspects there. And then there's also housing rights. Some of our immigrants and refugee community, or even just vulnerable populations, will fall prey to landlords that will threaten them with, if you ask me to fix this leak on the roof, I'm going to have to change your rent and increase it by this percentage.
Right.
And in fear of retaliation, you'll end up just keeping silent.
Right.
And, there's a lot of legalities around that.
Exactly.
And so just empowering individuals so that they can actually have a good quality of life, so that they're not exposed to lead, because we know the West Side and other parts of, pockets in the city, it's deeply infested with lead.
Exactly.
Lead poisoning is huge.
Yep.
And so much time and resources goes towards education, but an equal amount goes to supporting our youth. And so there's a summer youth program that we have, and we house about 90 kids actually each year. And they're able to not only kind of learn from others who look like them, but it's really there to help shape their future and give them hope. Because if all of their teachers, depending on where they are, predominantly do not reflect their cultures and their values, they're always going to look at that as something that they're not able to attain.
Right.
And so coming through our program, receiving the tools, and then really putting them to work also. Every Friday when they're doing the summer youth program, they're out there cleaning up the yards, cleaning up the block, planting, gardening, helping to beautify the neighborhood, because we want them to have a sense of ownership. Not many of them own properties, of course, in terms of their families, they're renters.
Right.
And we know when you're a renter, unfortunately, sometimes you don't feel like you have an ownership in your community. And so what we're trying to empower them with is their parents to go through the financial literacy classes, and for the children, the youth, to really understand ways that they can feel this is their neighborhood. They need to protect it. They need to make sure it's clean so that they don't damage it. Because teenagers will be teenagers.
Yeah, of course.
No matter what culture they're from.
Of course.
They speak the language of teenagers. So there's a ton of resources around there. I feel very privileged. I don't think it's us as an organization teaching the community. I think it's the community also teaching us. That's equally important. It's not a one-way street. The board is no better than anyone else. We are literally learning from one another. The same way we are helping, they're helping us. Our services are there because there's a need. I would like for us to get to the point where our services are not needed. I think that's really important. And sometimes that's not a mindset locally or internationally. We want to keep having these services.
Right.
But if the need can be eliminated,
right,
it's about time we need to get to that point.
But
that's my goal.
It's about community building too, right? And so even if your direct services go away, it's still a beautiful community space that, like you said, the community can take ownership of, right?
Yes.
Have those businesses there. It can be a mainstay. Those teenagers that you have working for you can be adults, and their kids can come and say, I used to hang out here as a kid and I used to clean up and whatever.
Right.
And having those type of memories and community investment is just an invaluable, investment into the community. And I think that that's amazing work that you are all doing. I don't know if there's any other way people can support you all in that work. I know you said you fundraised for 10 years. I'm so sorry it took that long, but it really is that tough to do community-oriented work. I love that you did have some champions, both on city, state, and county level to help you out.
Well, we're expanding now. That's the exciting part. So across the street where the McDonald's was, if you remember,
that closed down. Down.
So guess who purchased that property now?
Oh, wow.
We ended up reaching out to their headquarters in Massachusetts right away, and we said, well, this is a community asset. We have never thought about expanding forward, but this is a great opportunity.
That's awesome.
And
I saw a new coat of paint on there. I didn't know that was you all. So that's really exciting.
Yes, that's us.
That's great.
Knock on wood, everything works through. We're working with partners in the around the neighborhood. But it's an asset, and of course, we would not want to see that location itself just deteriorate.
Of course.
Property is there. Why demolish it? You can do something with it. There's a lot of kitchen space there. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that need kitchen space that are just cooking out of homes. Have the right fridges, the right spaces. So this is going to be huge. It's a game changer for us.
That's awesome.
So I'm really excited. So if you are interested in volunteering, there's so many opportunities, whether it's plugging in away with the educational side of stuff, the programming side, whether it's the fundraising, or even just, providing some element of support, because we're going to need more bookkeeping support. We would like to build upwards so that we have some residential units upstairs on top of the McDonald's also.
Oh, great.
There's a lot of good plans there. So
wonderful. Well, we're excited for the future of H.E.A.L and all of the other wonderful entrepreneurship support and pathways that Juweria is creating. You're just one amazing individual who's just trying to help the community in just so many different ways.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here in the Buffalo area, because a lot of the time it's really hard for us to keep really community-oriented talent in the area. So you're such an asset, and I thank you so much for being here. Thank you once again. This is Dejia James with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 365 organizations working to build a better Buffalo. It's The Public Good, Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m. on Power 96.5 FM and Mix 1080 a.m.